Hello, my name is Indigo. I wasn't supposed to come home that night, but something in my chest told me to. When I walked through that door, I saw my sister standing over our blind mother, cane in hand, fury in her eyes. My mom was on the floor, bruised, trembling. I froze. This wasn't the sister I grew up with. This was someone else, someone who'd been hiding behind polished words and family smiles. What would you do if the person you trusted most was the one your mother feared most? I didn't know then that saving her would come at the cost of tearing my entire family apart. But the worst part? No one believed me. Would you? The first thing that hit me was the smell: wet carpet, damp drywall, and something burnt. I pushed the door open with my elbow, my suitcase in one hand, a grocery bag in the other. Thunder cracked somewhere overhead, shaking the house's old bones. The porch light flickered like it had for the past 20 years. Vera was supposed to have fixed it months ago. I wasn't supposed to be here. My conference in San Diego had been canceled last minute due to a storm warning, so I drove home thinking I'd surprise Mom, a little unannounced visit. She always said I didn't stop by enough, but I hadn't heard back from Vera all day. That was unusual. She texted like a project manager, over-communicated everything. I figured she was busy or charging her phone, but this silence felt different. Off, like a stone in my chest that refused to settle. The front door wasn't locked. That alone sent my stomach twisting. Mom might have left it unlocked, sure, she's blind, not careless, but Vera would never allow that, not in this neighborhood, not in her house. I stepped inside. The lights were dim, shadows swaying with each flash of lightning. There was no TV, no hum of the radio Mom liked to keep on low, just silence and heavy breathing, rough, shallow. I dropped the bag on the entryway floor and followed the sound. One step into the hallway, and I saw it. Her cane, laid sideways across the hardwood like it had been dropped mid-move. My heart thudded, louder than the rain outside. "Mom?" I called softly, but my voice cracked. The living room came into view, and time stopped. There, in the corner near the fireplace, my mother, my 75-year-old, blind mother, was curled up against the wall, one arm flung over her head as if trying to shield herself. Her nightgown was soaked, and her breathing was jagged. Above her stood Vera, my sister, the woman I had trusted with everything when I moved out 10 years ago. She was holding the cane like a weapon, her mouth twisted with something I didn't recognize: rage, desperation, madness. "Vera!" I shouted. "What the hell are you doing?" She froze, like a child caught in the middle of something she couldn't explain. The cane slipped from her fingers, clattered onto the floor. She's been cursing me," Vera stammered. "You don't understand. She's been trying to ruin me." "What are you talking about?" "She won't stop praying in that language, Igbo or whatever. She keeps saying things about my womb. I've tried everything, Indigo. Prayers, pills, therapy, no baby, nothing. And she's still here, blind and smug like she knows something I don't." I dropped to my knees beside Mom, gently brushing her damp hair back. Her cheek was bruised. A red welt marked the side of her arm. "Mom, it's me. It's Indigo. I'm here," I whispered, heart hammering against my ribs. She moaned, her lips barely parting. She hit me. Again." My fingers were trembling as I pulled out my phone. I dialed 911. My voice dropped to a whisper, not because I was scared, but because I knew what I was doing now. "My parents are down there. She's not safe with her." The operator asked for details, and I gave them everything: address, symptoms, my sister's name. When I looked back up, Vera was gone. I heard the back door creak open. Of course, she always ran when things turned ugly. As I waited for the paramedics, I pressed my palm gently against Mom's chest, feeling for steady breaths. I tried not to cry. Not yet. I needed to be clear-headed when they arrived. In those long minutes, my mind ran backward. Years of being the baby sister. The one they joked was too emotional, too soft. I was the one who stayed back during every argument to keep the peace. The one who mailed checks every month to help with things, even though no one ever acknowledged them. "You're not responsible," Vera used to say. "You're the youngest. You don't get how real life works." But I did. I just never shouted it from the rooftops. I remembered one birthday, I think I was 26, when Mom called me by accident. She thought she was calling Vera. She started crying, told me she felt like a burden, that maybe she should move into a home so she wouldn't ruin Vera's marriage, that Vera kept saying things were tight, that she kept apologizing when she asked for groceries. It made me feel sick back then. It made me feel furious now. The ambulance lights broke through the window, red and white beams painting the living room in sharp flashes. I heard the screech of the tires on the wet curb, the doors flying open. Paramedics stormed in, one of them crouching beside me. "She's cold," he muttered. "She was on the floor. I think she passed out from fear," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. It was firmer. As they loaded her onto the gurney, one of them looked at me. "Are you family?" "I'm her daughter, Indigo." "And the person who did this?" "My sister." He blinked, like he wasn't sure he heard me right. But he didn't ask again. I stood up, grabbed the cane off the floor, and followed them outside. Vera was leaning against her car in the driveway. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but her hair was soaked. She looked at me like she was the victim. "I can explain," she said, her voice hollow. I stepped in front of her. "You will pay for this." She didn't move, didn't speak, but I saw it. For the first time in her life, Vera didn't have a comeback. Silence can be louder than screams. That's the only way I can explain the ride to the hospital. Mom lay motionless on the stretcher beside me, her lips parted slightly, her breathing shallow but steady. The paramedics worked quietly, professionally, checking her vitals, shining lights in her eyes as if that would matter. I sat at her side, clutching her hand, my other hand gripping the side rail so hard my knuckles ached. I didn't cry. Not then. I couldn't afford to. We pulled up to UC Davis Medical Center just past 10:15 p.m. The ER bay doors flung open, lights blinding as they rushed Mom in. I followed close behind until a nurse stopped me with a palm to the chest. "Ma'am, we need space to work. Please wait in the lobby. Someone will update you shortly." I wanted to scream that I was her daughter, that I had just pulled her off the floor of her own living room while my sister loomed over her with a cane. But all that came out was, "Please be gentle with her. She's blind and scared." The nurse nodded once, the kind of nod that says, "We've heard worse," and disappeared behind automatic doors. I stood there, unsure of what to do next, until I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around, and there she was, Vera, dry now, hair brushed, a fresh coat of lipstick, calm as a Sunday sermon. She tilted her head, arms folded like she had every right to be there. "Where's Mom?" she asked, as if she hadn't been in that same house 20 minutes earlier. "She's inside," I said flatly. I figured. She looked around like she was surveying her kingdom. Did they ask what happened? They didn't have to. I told them. Her eyes narrowed, but her mouth stayed polite. "You always jump to conclusions, Indigo." No. This time, I walked into one. A nurse called her name, and just like that, she turned and floated down the hallway with the grace of someone who'd rehearsed this moment. I watched her disappear through those same automatic doors and felt like the floor beneath me gave just a little. A few minutes later, a young doctor approached and introduced himself as part of the ER team. I asked if I could see my mother, but he told me she was being examined and stabilized. He promised someone would update me soon. I sat down in the plastic waiting room chair, every muscle in my back knotted tight. Then I heard my name, but not from staff. "I need to speak to someone about my sister," Vera said loudly, just around the corner of the nurses' station. She wasn't whispering, she wanted me to hear. "She's been under a lot of emotional stress lately," she said. "She means well, but she's always been sensitive. Since we were kids, she sometimes sees things that aren't really there." I stood up, walked over, and made eye contact with the nurse she was speaking to. "She's lying," I said simply. The nurse looked caught in the middle. Vera turned and gave me a look that was sugar-coated poison. "Don't make this harder than it already is," she said sweetly. "You're tired. You've been traveling. You're overwhelmed." "No," I replied, keeping my voice steady. You're dangerous." That's when Vera played her hand. She turned back to the nurse and pulled out a neatly folded paper. "I'm her medical power of attorney. All major decisions go through me." The nurse looked down, read quickly, then nodded. "Thank you, Ms. Carver. We'll keep you updated directly." That's when I remembered. Mom once told me over a holiday call, "I just let Vera handle the paperwork. It's easier." I thought she meant bill paying. I had no idea it went deeper. I took a step back, stunned, not because Vera had control, but because she had used that control like a weapon. I returned to my seat and did the only thing I could think of. I pulled out my phone and started calling people. Family. Anyone who might listen. First, Aunt Beverly. She answered on the second ring. "Bev, it's me. Indigo. Something happened. I caught Vera hitting Mom. She's in the ER right now." A pause. Then, "That doesn't sound like Vera. Are you sure Mom didn't fall again?" I bit my lip. She was cowering in a corner. "Well," she exhaled, "you've always been the dramatic one. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding." I hung up without replying. Next, I tried Cousin Marcus. Voicemail. Then Aunt Gloria. She answered, but only whispered, "You know how families are. Don't stir up trouble unless you have proof." By the time I ended the third call, I wasn't just angry, I was humiliated. It didn't matter what I'd seen, not to them. I stood and walked outside, the automatic doors hissing behind me. The rain had turned to mist. I leaned against a column and closed my eyes, trying to catch my breath. My phone buzzed. A message from Vera. "If you try anything stupid, remember who they'll believe." I stared at the screen for a full minute before locking it again. That text didn't scare me. It confirmed everything. She wasn't afraid of what I might say. She was afraid I might be believed, and that, more than anything, told me what I needed to do. I slid to the ground, my back pressed against the cold cement. The windows above me glowed, but they felt unreachable, like a world I didn't belong to. A nurse walked past, glancing down, then continued inside. I wasn't crying. Not this time. I was planning. I took out my phone and opened the voice recorder. My hand shook slightly as I whispered into it. March 19th, 11:47 p.m. Mom is in the ER. Vera is controlling access. Family won't listen. I need to start collecting everything. Next time, I won't just show up. I'll show up with evidence. The doors behind me hissed open again. It was the same nurse from before. She looked tired, but kind. "Ms. Carver, your sister asked that you leave. For now. For your own good." I stood up slowly. My legs felt heavy. "Is my mother conscious?" "I can't say." I nodded. "Okay, but tell her something when she wakes up." She waited. "Tell her I'm not going away this time." The drive home felt like a blur, like I was watching the world from behind a fogged-up window. I didn't turn on the radio. Didn't want noise. Didn't want to be distracted. I needed the silence, even if it pressed in hard against my chest. It was just after 1 a.m. when I unlocked the door to my apartment and stepped inside. The lamp near the couch cast a warm, familiar glow across the living room. I kicked off my shoes without thinking, dropped my keys into the bowl by the door, and stood there for a moment, letting the quiet sink in. The hospital, Vera, the look on my mother's face, her body trembling beneath mine, her voice barely a breath. She hit me, again. I hadn't slept. There was no way I could. My clothes still smelled faintly of antiseptic and cold air from the ER. I didn't bother changing. I just walked straight to the kitchen, filled a glass with water, and sat at the table. And then I cried. Not loud, not desperate, just a slow leak, like my body finally decided it was safe to feel again. But I didn't let it last long, because something kept tugging at me, something I couldn't ignore, a memory, a detail that until now hadn't seemed important. 3 weeks ago, it was one of those unseasonably hot days in Sacramento, and I dropped off a bag of groceries at the house. Mom answered the door herself, as usual, her hands moving over the edge of the frame until she found the knob. She was wearing a long-sleeved sweater. I remember asking her, "Mom, aren't you hot in that?" She'd smiled, small and tight. "I get cold easily now." I didn't think twice. Maybe she was being modest. Maybe her medications made her more sensitive to temperature. But now I knew better. She had been covering bruises. I set the water down and went to the hallway closet, pulled down an old storage bin I hadn't touched in over a year. It was the one where I kept sentimental things, cards, letters, random knickknacks from when Mom used to craft. At the bottom, under a stack of unused Christmas cards, I found it, a heavy plastic Tupperware container. She'd given it to me a couple of years ago. "Keep this safe," she had said. "It's just old stories I wrote, nothing important." At the time, I didn't ask questions. She was blind and wanted to hold on to her independence, and I thought maybe it was her way of preserving her mind. But now, I had to know. Inside was a thick, textured book. Braille. My fingers traced the bumps, uselessly. I couldn't read it. I didn't know how. But technology did. I pulled out my phone, downloaded a Braille-to-text app, and carefully began photographing page after page, one by one. The app worked slowly, translating each image into flat, printed English. I waited, I watched, and when the first page loaded, I stopped breathing. She doesn't hit me every day, just when she's angry. When the door slams, I know I have 10 seconds to brace. I scrolled. I used to cry. That made her angrier. Now I stay quiet. I think silence upsets her more. Another. I don't want Indigo to know. She deserves peace. She lives her life with kindness. I don't want that ruined. And another. I'm afraid to sleep. Each entry cut deeper than the last. She had been keeping a record, a diary, not of hope, not of joy, but of pain, hidden in a language most couldn't read. And she'd given it to me. Not by accident. My hands trembled as I copied the text into a document. I cataloged each page, added dates where she had written them. Some were recent, others went back months, maybe more. Vera hadn't just lost her temper. This wasn't an isolated moment. This was a pattern. I sat there for over an hour, reading every entry, each one like a punch to the stomach. But it wasn't just pain that filled me. It was clarity. My mother had been documenting her abuse because no one else would believe her. Or worse, because no one would care. But she believed in me. She trusted that someday I'd read those pages. And now I had. By the time the sun was brushing against the windows and the sky turned a pale, pinkish gray, I'd backed up every file. 3 locations. Hard drive, cloud, secure folder. I wasn't going to lose any of it. I sat back in my chair, my eyes burning, my body exhausted but buzzing. "You wrote this for a reason, didn't you, Mom?" I whispered. Because she knew Vera would try to bury it, and she knew I'd be the one left to dig it up. I opened my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found his name. Michael Reed. Mike was a family law attorney. We'd worked together years ago on a nonprofit case involving senior neglect. He was fair, sharp, and more importantly, he had a low tolerance for cruelty. I drafted a message, fingers hovering over the screen before I typed. "Hey Mike, hope you're well. Quick question. Hypothetically, if a blind elderly woman was being physically abused by her caregiver, let's say her daughter, and her other daughter witnessed it but got pushed out legally, what would be the next step?" I stared at the blinking cursor for a long time before pressing send. Then I stood up, stretched, and opened the window. The cold morning air rushed in. It stung, but it also cleared something in me. This wasn't going to be like before. I wasn't going to be the one pushed to the side while Vera manipulated everyone around her. This time, I had proof. Real proof. Words in my mother's own voice, even if they were written with dots instead of ink. I made coffee, changed into fresh clothes, and sat back down to wait for Mike's reply. Whatever came next, I wouldn't be the quiet one anymore. By Saturday afternoon, I'd barely slept more than 2 hours. My thoughts were a slow-moving storm, quiet, heavy, impossible to escape. I spent most of that morning double-checking the files I had saved from Mom's Braille journal. Each entry stung in its own way, but I wasn't reading them to grieve. I was preparing. Vera had texted late Friday night. "Come by tomorrow. Let's clear the air. Family only." She didn't elaborate. No details, no warmth, just a command disguised as an olive branch. I should have known better than to go, but I did. Because a part of me, deep down, still wanted someone, anyone, to look me in the eye and say, "You were right to speak up." By the time I pulled into the driveway, the sun was already dipping lower, casting a gold hue over the house we grew up in. The same cracked sidewalk, the same porch swing Vera never fixed. For a second, it almost felt like walking into a memory, until the front door opened. My Aunt Valerie greeted me. She had that tight smile she always wore when she was about to say something condescending but wanted to sound polite. "Indigo," she said, "glad you could come." I stepped inside and instantly felt it, an energy I couldn't quite name, not warmth, not welcome, just rehearsal. Everyone in that living room had been waiting, seated like jurors who already knew the verdict. Uncle Gerald sat beside her, legs crossed, arms folded. On the far couch sat Vera, legs crossed neatly at the ankle, holding a folder. Next to her, Aunt Darlene stared down at her phone like she was waiting for a commercial break. Vera looked up with a practiced smile. "We all love Mom," she began. "But we need to talk about your behavior, Indigo." It landed like a slap. I didn't speak right away. I reached into my tote bag and pulled out 2 items. A printed set of Mom's Braille journal entries, translated, labeled, dated, and a photo of Mom's bruised arm, time-stamped. I placed both on the coffee table. "Here's what I came to say." Vera didn't even glance at them. She simply said, "You've always had a vivid imagination. You latch onto things and spiral. This isn't new." Aunt Valerie nodded, chiming in like they'd planned it. "You've always been the sensitive one. We're not attacking you, sweetie. We're just worried." Uncle Gerald leaned forward. "Are you sure Mom didn't fall? You know she's unsteady. And if she was really being hurt, why didn't she ever tell us?" I looked at them, baffled. "She's blind. She was scared. And she did tell us, through that journal." Vera picked up her folder and, with an almost theatrical flourish, pulled out glossy printed photos of Mom smiling at a barbecue, holding a grandchild, sitting peacefully in the backyard. "If I was hurting her," Vera said slowly, "would she look like this?" I stared at the photos. They were old, from last year, before things got worse. But they were enough to confuse anyone who wanted to believe everything was fine. I took a breath, my voice lower now. I put a camera in her room. Heads turned. "I installed it 2 weeks ago," I continued. "I didn't tell anyone. I needed to be sure." Vera's face didn't flinch. She just cocked her head. "You mean you secretly recorded in a private space? That's illegal." I checked the laws. In California, I can record in a private residence if I'm the one who lives there and there's suspicion of elder abuse, and considering I still have mail addressed to me at that house, I qualify. Aunt Darlene looked up, finally interested. "So what did it show?" I opened my phone, pulled up the app, and stopped. The folder was gone. Not just missing, wiped clean, no thumbnails, no cached files, nothing. My heart plummeted. I backed out, checked my cloud storage, same result. I looked up at Vera, who was already smiling. "You know, tech glitches happen," she said sweetly, "especially when you don't know what you're doing." "You deleted it," she shrugged. "Or maybe you never had anything to begin with." Uncle Gerald cleared his throat. "Enough of this. Indigo, you need to stop tearing this family apart with these accusations. Mom is old. She's confused sometimes. You're the one causing chaos here, not Vera." Something inside me gave way, but not in a crumbling kind of way, more like a snap. The sound of steel settling into place. I reached across the table, picked up the printed journal entries, and stood up. No one tore this family apart. You just didn't see it happening. Or you chose not to. No one spoke. I didn't wait for them to. I walked out of that house, the same one where I used to play hide and seek in the hallway, where Mom used to hum while folding laundry, where I once thought family meant protection, The sun was lower now. Shadows stretched across the yard. I unlocked my car, tossed my bag into the passenger seat, and was about to drive off when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Voicemail. I listened. I used to clean for your sister. I saw things. I want to talk. The voice on that voicemail stayed with me long after it ended. There was something in the way she said, I saw things, that tightened every muscle in my body. It wasn't the fear in her tone. It was the certainty. I spent the rest of Saturday evening going over the digital files again, making sure I hadn't missed anything. Then I replied to the number. Can you meet tomorrow? The response came just after midnight. Yes, Corner Cafe on 26th and N at 2. By the time Sunday rolled around, I had barely slept. But it wasn't exhaustion I felt, it was purpose. For the first time since that night in the living room, I felt like someone might actually listen. I arrived 15 minutes early. The cafe was quiet, tucked away between a bookstore and an old tailor's shop. I sat at a table by the window, a folder in my bag containing the printed journal entries and side-by-side comparisons of Mom's old and recent signatures. I didn't want to scare this woman off by throwing everything at her, but I needed to be ready. She arrived right on time. Elandra was older than I expected, maybe late 50s. She moved slowly, carefully, like someone who had spent most of her life working with her hands. Her gray coat was buttoned to the neck despite the warmth of the afternoon, and her eyes scanned the room before landing on me. Indigo? I nodded and stood to shake her hand. Her grip was soft but steady. Thank you for coming, I said. I almost didn't, she admitted, sliding into the chair across from me. I've kept this to myself a long time. You said you worked for my sister? She sighed. 3 months, just enough to learn what kind of person she is. We ordered coffee. Mine sat untouched. Elandra didn't dance around the subject. Your mother, she was never treated right in that house. From the first day I started, I could tell something was off. The way she flinched when Vera entered the room. The way she froze up when I asked if she needed help getting outside. She didn't say anything, but her body did. I felt a familiar knot tightening in my throat. Did you ever see her get hurt? Not directly, but I heard things. Doors slamming, shouting, things breaking. Once I found her in the hallway, trying to make it to the bathroom alone. No cane, no help, just her hands on the wall. She was shaking. My hands curled into fists on the table. Why didn't you say something? I did. Quietly. I called a friend who works in elder care, but unless there's proof, unless she was willing to report it, they said nothing could be done. She paused, then reached into her bag and slid a folded piece of paper toward me. I kept this, just in case. It was a photocopy of a legal document, power of attorney, Leocadia Carver, dated February 2nd, signed, barely. She had the flu that week, Elandra said. Burning up. Couldn't speak clearly, couldn't hold a spoon, and your sister shoved that paper in front of her, told her it was just an insurance update, handed her a pen. She signed it without even asking. I unfolded the paper and compared the signature to one of Mom's older ones I had brought. They didn't match, not even close. Would you be willing to testify? Elandra hesitated. I don't know. I've got my own job to think about, my own life. But maybe, if it means she's safe. I nodded, not pressing her. She took a sip of her coffee, then looked at me with something close to guilt. I wish I'd done more. You're doing something now, I said. That counts. We sat in silence for a while. Then she stood, adjusted her coat, and said, Be careful with your sister. She doesn't lose gracefully. After she left, I didn't move for a long time. I just stared at that forged signature and thought about all the ways Vera had turned our mother's weakness into an advantage. By late afternoon, I was back home, at my desk, building the beginnings of a case. I printed the Braille entries, labeled the dates, matched them to times Vera had been home. I pulled the high-resolution photo of the bruises from my camera roll and added it to the folder. I even reached out to Nancy, a retired social worker I'd once worked with, who had visited Mom last year during a state check-in. She said she remembered some odd tension in the house, but had chalked it up to caregiving stress. I'll check my notes, she said. Maybe there's something I missed. As I worked, the afternoon melted into evening. By 5 p.m., I had scanned everything, cataloged every detail. My hands ached, my back sore, but my mind felt clear. I picked up my phone and typed the message slowly, choosing each word with care. You used to ignore me. Now you'll need to answer me. I'm giving you one chance to stop this. I hit send, read at 3:42 p.m. No reply. And I knew that meant war. After hitting send on that text to Vera, I didn't expect an immediate response, but I watched the status bar anyway. Read. That was all I got. No dots, no typing bubble, just that word staring back at me like a smirk behind a locked door. I'd already prepared a digital case folder, scanned documents, side-by-side signature comparisons, journal entries from Mom's Braille notebook, photos of the bruises, and Alondra's testimony, all saved under the innocuous name Project L. But I wasn't relying on Google Drive alone. I backed everything up to 2 encrypted USB drives. One I kept in my purse, the other I taped beneath the drawer in my kitchen. And then, the final piece, I added a video. A week earlier, our neighbor's outdoor security camera had captured something. A shaky black and white clip, but clear enough. Vera, yelling, dragging Mom down the front steps in broad daylight. Mom's feet barely moved as she was pulled toward the car, her cane left behind on the porch. I didn't even know the neighbor had caught it until she stopped me outside the mailbox and said, "I'm sorry if this is none of my business, but something about this didn't sit right." She handed me a flash drive, said she didn't want to get involved but thought I should have it. That video was now part of my file. I crafted an email to a law firm in the city that specialized in elder abuse and probate fraud, known for going up against family members who manipulate legal control over aging relatives. The email was short and to the point, no emotional flourishes, just facts, time-stamped files, and a clear subject line. Request for urgent legal counsel, abuse and fraudulent POA. It was sent before midnight. Then, for the first time in what felt like weeks, I sat still. The apartment was quiet except for the soft hum of the fridge. My phone screen was dark, my laptop lid shut. I stared at the wall and waited, for anything. The silence stretched until it wasn't silence anymore. It became dread, anticipation, the pause before something breaks. And then, just after 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Voicemail. I played it, holding the phone close to my ear. The voice was distorted, run through some cheap audio filter, but the message was clear. You should have stayed out of it. If you don't, you'll go down with her. Accidents happen. Think about it. Click. I didn't flinch, not at first, but the echo of those words lingered in the room like smoke. I saved the voicemail and forwarded it immediately, first to the lawyer's intake email, then to Officer Helen Rosas, a detective I knew from my time clerking at the courthouse. She'd handled domestic cases with a rare mix of tenacity and patience. We weren't close, but she respected paper trails, and I had one long enough to reach her desk. Then I sat back, pulled the blinds, and looked out into the hallway. It was still dark, but I saw movement under my door. Just a faint shift in the light. Probably nothing, but still, I got up, checked the locks twice, and opened the drawer under the sink. I pulled out the mini security cam I'd bought after Mom's fall last year. I hadn't needed it then. I needed it now. An hour later, the camera was mounted, synced, and running. It had night vision, cloud backup, and a motion alert feature that would ping my phone the moment something passed within 10 feet of my door. I texted Sam, a former co-worker and the only person I trusted completely. If anything happens to me, I wrote, check my cloud folder, INDG Truth. Password is the name of the hospital Mom's in, all caps. He replied instantly. Got it. You okay? I will be. I set my phone down and grabbed Mom's journal. The real one, the Braille version I hadn't touched since translating it. I flipped to the last entry. I don't know what tomorrow looks like, but if Indigo comes home, I'll be okay. I just have to hold on. I closed the journal and pressed it against my chest. The air in the room felt heavier, not oppressive, just full of something unspoken, something between fear and fire. I wasn't scared, not anymore. I was angry and awake. I opened my laptop again. I clicked over to YouTube, opened a new upload tab, and dragged in a pre-recorded video. A simple message from me to whoever needed to see it. If anything happens to me, I began in the video, my voice calm. This wasn't an accident. You'll find proof in the files. My name is Indigo Carver. My mother is Leocadia. She's been abused, manipulated, and silenced. But not anymore. I set the video to private, scheduled it to publish in 48 hours. Then I went into the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, and stared into the mirror. It's not just about protecting her anymore, I whispered to my reflection. It's about exposing you. After that final upload, the next few days moved like molasses, thick, heavy, and unrelenting. I had no way of knowing if Vera was panicking behind the scenes, but on the surface, she was calm as ever. Not a single response to my text, not a call, just silence. Until the envelope arrived. It came on a Wednesday morning, delivered by certified mail. I opened the door still in my robe, coffee in hand, and signed without thinking. But the second I saw the return address, Sacramento County Superior Court, my stomach clenched. Inside was a copy of a legal petition, request for restraining order, filed by Vera Carver, claim, harassment, defamation, psychological intimidation. The words blurred as I read them. It was like she'd beat me to the punch, dragging me into court before I could do the same. There it was, her name on the paperwork, a statement claiming I was emotionally unstable, prone to obsessive behavior, and a potential threat to the well-being of our mother. A pre-hearing was scheduled for Friday. Just 2 days. She didn't just want to silence me, she wanted to destroy my credibility before I had a chance to speak. I sat down hard on the edge of the couch, the papers still trembling in my hands. It took everything in me not to scream. But instead, I did what I always did when cornered. I went back to the evidence. That night, I reopened every folder I had organized, cross-referenced dates, rewatched the neighbor's footage, checked the time-stamped medical records. Everything still held up. And then I remembered something I hadn't touched in days, the pillow. It was one of the last things I packed from Mom's bedroom before the ambulance took her away. She had always insisted on using that old floral pillow, said it helped her sleep. What I hadn't realized at the time was that I'd hidden a voice recorder inside it weeks earlier, tucked deep within the lining. I'd placed it there quietly one afternoon, after hearing another one of Vera's outbursts through the hallway. I had downloaded the file, labeled it, and completely forgotten it in the chaos. Now I pulled it up. The audio crackled at first, like distant radio static. Then voices emerged. Vera's voice, sharp and cold. Say it. Say you're sorry for ruining my life. A pause. Then my mother's voice, small and trembling. Why do you hate me? It wasn't long, barely 2 minutes. But it was enough. I stopped the recording and just sat there, my hands shaking so badly I could barely breathe. That was it. That was the nail. Friday came fast. I arrived at the courthouse early, file folder clutched tightly in one hand, jaw set like concrete. I wore gray slacks, a clean blouse, and not a trace of makeup. I didn't want sympathy. I wanted truth. The courtroom was quiet, only a few people inside, most waiting for their own hearings. Vera sat near the front, hair pinned, jacket crisp, her lawyer beside her. She looked like the poster child for composure. I took a seat across from her. She didn't look at me once. When the judge finally entered, we all stood. Then it began. Vera's lawyer spoke first. Calm, articulate, efficient. Miss Indigo Carver has displayed escalating behavior in recent weeks, including uninvited surveillance, obsessive messaging, and false allegations without evidence. My client fears for her safety and that of their shared mother. Vera herself stood and added, I've always cared for our mother, always. But Indigo, she's not well. She sees things that aren't there. She's convinced herself that I'm someone I'm not. A murmur passed through the back of the room. A few heads nodded. The judge took notes. I sat still, every part of me screaming to speak. But I waited. Then my turn came. I stood, opened my folder, pulled out the photos of bruises, a copy of the fraudulent power of attorney. Then, without flinching, I played the pillow recording aloud. The courtroom hushed, completely. Vera's voice. Live. Say you're sorry for ruining my life. Followed by Mom's quiet weep. Why do you hate me? It was only seconds, but the effect was seismic. Someone whispered in the back. That's her voice. That's Vera. The judge looked up sharply. Vera's lawyer shifted in his seat. When it ended, I let the silence speak. The judge cleared his throat and said, I'll need time to review all materials presented. A decision will be rendered within 48 hours. And that was it. As I gathered my papers and turned to leave, I felt eyes on me, some sympathetic, some confused. One woman, sitting near the aisle, gave me a small nod. I didn't know her, but I nodded back. Outside the courtroom, my phone buzzed, a call from Aunt Valerie. I debated answering, then did. Her voice was tense. Even if she did it, did you really have to expose her like that? You ruined our name. I didn't reply right away. Then I said calmly, No, she did. I just turned the lights on. And I hung up. Back at home, I poured a glass of water and sat at the kitchen table, the folder of evidence now half empty. I looked toward the hallway camera, still blinking, still watching. Mom's diary sat on the counter beside me. I hadn't opened it in days. I flipped it open. I don't need her to be punished, one entry read. I just need someone to believe me. Well, someone had. Now the rest would follow. The courthouse felt colder that morning, despite the warm spring sun filtering through its tall windows. I'd never seen so many people in that room. Reporters, neighbors, and unfamiliar faces packed the benches, all waiting for something they didn't fully understand. Mom sat beside me in her wheelchair, her hand resting lightly over mine. It was the first time she'd returned to this building since Dad passed. Her back was straight, her chin lifted. Despite the bruises still faint on her forearms, she looked composed, stronger than I'd seen her in months. We were early. I needed us to be. The room gradually filled with low murmurs, heels clicking against tile, papers shuffling. Every time someone entered, my heart jumped, until finally, Vera walked in. She was dressed like she was attending a brunch, ivory blouse, navy blazer, subtle gold earrings. Her lawyer trailed behind, adjusting his briefcase. I caught her glance briefly, just enough to see she was still clinging to the performance, still hoping to win by polish. She didn't approach us. The bailiff called the room to order, and the judge stepped out, glasses perched low, his expression unreadable. All rise. We did. My mother's hand gripped mine a little tighter, and I squeezed back. Please be seated. The judge began reading through the summary of the hearing. My heartbeat echoed in my ears. In light of the audio evidence submitted, and the inconsistencies within the submitted power of attorney documents, he paused, his gaze lifting to meet Vera's for the first time. This court finds sufficient grounds to issue a permanent protective order for Ms. Leocadia Carver. Further, the court is recommending a criminal investigation be opened concerning possible violations of elder care statutes and suspected document fraud. Gasps fluttered through the crowd, like birds startled from a tree. I didn't look at Vera right away. I was too focused on Mom's shoulders, which had sagged just the tiniest bit, as if she'd exhaled a breath she'd been holding for years. The judge banged the gavel once. Miss Carver, he addressed Vera, you will be taken into temporary custody pending further review by the DA's office. You may speak with your counsel privately. Vera stood slowly, her face cracked, just a flicker. She opened her mouth as if to object, but no words came out. Her attorney leaned in, whispering quickly, and moments later, 2 deputies approached. Flashbulbs from the back of the courtroom popped as the camera phones came out. It all happened quietly. She didn't scream, didn't cry, but the smugness, it dissolved like sugar in hot water. I finally looked at her, not to gloat, not to taunt, just to see. She met my eyes, and in that moment, I saw the difference between us. I had fought with proof, not pride. I had endured quietly, and then spoken clearly. Mom leaned toward me. Is it over? she asked softly. I shook my head. It's just beginning. After court, as we made our way through the crowd of reporters, a woman thrust a microphone toward me. Miss Carver, are you planning to file civil charges as well? I kept walking, guiding Mom's wheelchair, but paused just long enough to answer. We're not looking back, we're rebuilding, one woman at a time. The cameras followed us down the marble steps. I shielded Mom's eyes from the light as we reached the curb, where a transport van waited. Sam, my old coworker, opened the side door and gave us a soft smile. He didn't say anything about the reporters. He just asked if we wanted coffee on the way home. Yes, Mom said quickly. Decaf, though. I'm still on doctor's orders. The ride was quiet. We didn't need to talk. That afternoon, after settling Mom back into my apartment, I made tea and sat with her on the balcony. The city buzzed below us, but up here, it felt distant. Calm. You don't have to be afraid anymore, Mom, I said. She didn't answer right away. Then she turned to me and said, I never was. I was just waiting for you. It broke me, not with sadness, but with release. Later that evening, a local news station ran the headline, Sister found guilty in elder abuse case, protective order granted, criminal charges pending. They played the audio, briefly, and shared stills from inside the courtroom. But they also included a clip from earlier that day, after the judge had ruled, when Mom addressed the press. She had leaned into the microphone and said, No mother should fear her child, and no daughter should have to fight alone to be heard. The quote went viral overnight. By the time I lay in bed, my phone was full of messages, from strangers, from other caregivers, from adult children who had once been called dramatic or too emotional just for speaking up. Not all of them were kind. Some accused me of destroying my family for attention. One email read, What kind of daughter turns on her own blood? I deleted it without reading the rest. But one message stopped me cold. It was from someone I didn't know. No name, just a subject line. Thank you. Inside, it said, My sister hit our mom too. We all stayed silent. Now Mom's gone. I wish I had done what you did. I closed my eyes and let the weight settle where it needed to. This wasn't a victory lap. It wasn't revenge. It was justice. And it was long overdue. 6 months later, the sun poured through the tall windows of our community center like honey. Slow, golden, warm. The room buzzed gently with quiet voices, soft footsteps, and the clinking of teacups. It was a modest space, painted in calming blues and lined with worn chairs and tables donated from 3 different churches, but it was ours. And when I say ours, I mean mine and Mom's. The sign out front read, Carver Center for Elder Dignity. We'd opened the doors 3 months after the court ruling, with funding from a local nonprofit and the help of a few retired social workers who had once tried, quietly, carefully, to report what they'd seen at Vera's house. I sat on a wooden bench near the back, watching as Mom stood at the podium, reading her speech. She was thinner now, more fragile in her movements, but her voice, though quiet, carried with the weight of someone who had spent too long being ignored. I am not here as a victim, she said, both hands resting on the edge of the podium. I am here as a mother who was believed. The room fell still. No child should have to beg to be heard. No elder should wonder if asking for help will cost them their family. Abuse doesn't always look like bruises. Sometimes it looks like silence. The audience, older folks, advocates, survivors, nodded, some with eyes already glistening. I recognized one woman who had flown in from Oregon to tell her story. A man in the 3rd row held a framed photo of his mother, lost last year in a similar situation. And yet, in all that pain, there was a strange, tangible hope in the air. Because we were naming it, breaking it open, and refusing to look away. After Mom stepped down, people clapped, not politely, but deeply. A standing ovation in a room where most had forgotten what it felt like to stand tall. As the event wound down, I stepped outside for air. The fall breeze carried that dry California scent, eucalyptus, pavement, and something crisp. Before I could finish a breath, I felt a tap on my arm. A young woman, maybe in her late 20s, stood beside me. Her eyes were wet, but her smile was steady. I'm sorry, she said quickly. I didn't mean to interrupt. It's okay, I replied. What's your name? Jessica. My aunt went through something like your mom. It tore our family apart. No one would believe her, and I didn't know what to do. I nodded, waiting. Your story, it gave us words. She's living with me now. We're figuring it out. I smiled, not wide, just enough to let her know I heard her. You did something now, I said. That's what matters. She exhaled, as if she'd been holding that story for years. When I returned home that evening, Mom was already asleep in the room next to mine. We shared the apartment now. Simpler, safer, quieter. I poured myself a glass of water and sat at the desk, rifling through old papers, looking for something else entirely when I found the drawer. Tucked in the back, wrapped in a yellowing envelope, was a photo I hadn't seen in years. It was me, as a baby, cradled in Mom's arms. Vera had once tried to throw it out, said it was just clutter. I'd pulled it from the trash without saying anything, held on to it like a secret. I turned it over. There, printed in raised braille, was a message I hadn't known to look for back then. My indigo, my true light in the dark. The words hit me harder than anything the courtroom ever had. The next morning, I received a letter. Official seal, county office return address. I knew what it was before opening it. Vera had accepted a plea deal. No jail time, but she'd agreed to a full public apology, the permanent loss of her financial certification, and mandatory community service at elder care centers across the county for the next year. I held the letter for a moment. Then I lit a match and burned it over the sink. Let the past take her, I whispered. Not me. The final weekend of October, we drove up to the lake, just Mom and I. No phones, no inboxes. Just wind, trees, and water that shimmered like melted glass. We sat in silence for a long time before I asked, "Do you ever wish things had gone differently?" She didn't hesitate. No. It brought us here, didn't it? I rested my head on her shoulder as the sun dipped low over the hills, painting everything in amber. Her skin was warm beneath my cheek, and her arm wrapped around me gently, like she had all those years ago, before silence grew sharp, before truth got buried in family secrets. It was quiet again. But this time, it wasn't fear. It was peace. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was fighting to be heard. I thought I came home to save her. But maybe she saved me too. Sometimes, the people who hurt us the most are the ones we're told to trust without question. This story wasn't just about family, it was about courage and what it takes to speak up when silence feels safer. So let me ask you, have you ever been dismissed in your own family for telling the truth? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that reveal what happens behind closed doors.